Geographically, the Thar Desert appears to be a wasteland. Historically, it is an active funnel. Around 1800 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization faced a severe ecological crisis. A major tectonic shift diverted the Ghaggar-Hakra and Saraswati river systems eastward toward the Ganges plain, drying up the waterways that sustained ancient urban centers. The loss of this critical water supply forced the Harappan populations to migrate east. They left the failing cities of the Indus River Valley and pushed into the Gangetic plain and the fringes of the Thar Desert. Nomadic Steppe and West Eurasian pastoralists were moving down into the subcontinent from the northwest during the Bronze Age, converging on these exact same geographical routes. The Harappan civilization did not disappear, it fragmented. Without the agricultural surplus required to maintain massive cities, the people dispersed into small, isolated agricultural communities. Positioned right at this crossroads, the Thar Desert absorbed these massive, converging ancient migrations. It became a terminal repository where successive waves of people settled and overlapped. Today, the Thar region remains densely populated. Among its inhabitants are distinct, hereditary artisan communities that trace their occupations back centuries. We find groups like the traditional woodcarvers. They maintain specific guild-based traditions involving carving, measurement, and geometry, operating in tight geographic and occupational isolation. Right alongside them are pastoralist groups. They navigate the exact same physical terrain, but maintain a nomadic lifestyle focused on animal husbandry and long-distance mobility. These communities operate under a strict cultural rule known as kin-based occupational endogamy. Individuals marry exclusively within their own specific trade group. This cultural rule acts as a rigid biological isolator. For these groups, geographic proximity does not result in genetic homogenization. Because of this isolation, the genomes of these artisans function as a palimpsest. They preserve unmixed, distinct biological layers of those ancient Bronze Age migrations. To map these biological layers, geneticists use a statistical tool called principal component analysis, or PCA. It calculates and visualizes deep genetic structure. This is a genome-wide PCA plot. It maps modern global populations as individual data points to establish a baseline framework of human genetic diversity. The primary axis here plots the genetic gradient of the Indian subcontinent. It stretches from ancestral North Indian lineages at the top down to ancestral South Indian lineages at the bottom. Up here, we find the West Eurasian populations. This cluster establishes the upper bound of ancient Steppe and Middle Late Bronze Age admixture. Now, look at the precise locations of the Thar craft populations on this plot. They do not form a single, tight cluster. They exhibit a massive biological spread across the entire length of the cline. The pastoralists and woodcarvers sit high on the upper cline, closely aligning with West Eurasian lineages. In contrast, the potters and nomadic performers sit firmly at the lower end, aligning with southern clines. Geography does not dictate genetics here. Occupation does. A shared zip code in the desert clearly does not equal a shared ancestry. To quantify the exact ratios of these ancestral components within specific trade guilds, researchers use a mathematical model called admixture, calculated at k equals 9. This stacked bar plot breaks down the genetic makeup of individuals. Each vertical bar is a person, and each color segment represents a distinctly sourced ancestral lineage. The green and brown components represent Steppe and West Eurasian lineage. The yellow and lighter green components represent indigenous South Asian lineage. When we isolate the pastoralist and woodcarver groups, we find an unexpectedly high proportion of Steppe and Middle Late Bronze Age affinity. We see the opposite when we look at the potters and nomadic performers. Their genomes are heavily dominated by indigenous South Asian-related ancestry. We have two groups walking the exact same desert sand, but their genetic histories are entirely distinct, dictated solely by their ancestral trade. Identifying these ancestries is one step. Determining exactly when these admixtures and bottlenecks were permanently locked into the genome requires specific chronological dating. To date the ancient steppe admixture, geneticists rely on the Alder statistic. It measures the exponential decay of linkage disequilibrium, tracking how long a genetic mixture has been decaying over time. This line chart shows the Alder calculation, definitively dating the West Eurasian admixture in these populations, between 60 and 80 generations ago. This timeline correlates accurately with the archaeological and historical record of Indo-European and steppe pastoralist migrations entering the subcontinent. Next, researchers apply the ascend algorithm. This maps the intensity and timing of founder events, massive population bottlenecks where a group becomes severely isolated. The ascend data reveals extreme founder events occurring exactly 400 to 500 years ago across several of the artisan subgroups. This specific bottleneck aligns with the Mughal era. Craft production systems were institutionalized into rigid social structures, permanently freezing the artisans' genetic ratios in place. Deep ancestry provides the historical baseline. But daily lifestyle drives rapid biological adaptation, an active process known as gene culture coevolution. We can track this through specific genetic markers, like the -13910 Ta allele. This variant enables lactase persistence, allowing humans to digest milk into adulthood. This dual-pane infographic maps the lactase persistence allele. The Thar pastoralist group possesses a massive 67.9% frequency, mirroring European pastoralists due to millennia of reliance on dairy. Compare that to the Persian golden bossers. Despite similar West Eurasian ancestry, they show the lowest frequency. An occupational lifestyle exerts intense evolutionary pressures. These pressures operate entirely independently from a population's baseline deep ancestry. We see another precise example of this with the SLC24A5 allele. This evolutionary marker is strongly associated with lighter skin pigmentation in Eurasian populations. Biologically, this presents a paradox. Light skin pigmentation is highly disadvantageous in a high-radiation, extreme solar environment like the Thar Desert. This regional heat map charts the variant. Despite the brutal desert environment, genomic data shows extraordinarily high retention of this allele across many of the artisan groups. The mathematics of strict cultural endogamy were so powerful that they entirely overrode the natural environmental selection for darker skin. The Thar Desert stands as an active, living laboratory of human history. Through strict guild enforcement and occupational isolation, these populations prove that human culture, everyday livelihood, and deep genetic history remain inextricably bound together.